Next from Chicago, we sit down with Chris Taylor, the general manager of Chicago for Uber Technologies, as he talks about the benefits of Uber, a smartphone app that connects those needing a car ride with drivers in the surrounding area. Mr. Taylor also comments on legislation pursued by politicians that could hurt the fledgling business, including a bill, HB 4075, that was vetoed by Governor Quinn a couple of days after this interview. This runs about 30 minutes.
Chris Taylor with Uber, thanks for joining us on the Illinois Channel.
Wonderful to be here. Thank you for having me.
You know, Uber is not a name that people would necessarily be familiar with, although probably a growing number of people certainly are, and probably in the Chicagoland area. But for all those who are going to be watching us either in other parts of the state or around the United States, let's bring them up to speed. What is Uber?
Certainly. Uber is a technology platform. So it's a smartphone app that connects riders and drivers at the tap of a button. And what that really means is that I'm out on the town and I need to get somewhere. So be it to work in the morning or home from a bar late at night, or maybe just to go out and see a buddy, I can open up the app and I'll see on a map exactly where I am, all of the available cars nearby me, and I can request a ride. Someone else nearby who's in their car has a phone as well. They see that I'm requesting a ride and they drive my way. On their way, I get to see a picture of their face, I get to see their license plate number and what type of vehicle they're in, and they also know my name. So when I get in the car, we know who the other person is, they know that I've got a registered credit card in the system, we go along on our way, and when they drop me off, I just hop out and a receipt gets emailed right to my email address.
So in a short version, it's a way basically kind of reinventing the taxi business, one might say.
I would say it's a new way to get around the city.
And to that end, who can be an Uber driver?
So people who become partners with Uber, it's really anybody. It's anybody who wants the chance to earn extra money on their own time. So there's no schedules, there's no lease payments, there's no expensive payment to a taxi company. It's your own vehicle. And to qualify, you have to pass our industry-leading background checks. So that's everything from federal, multi-state database, state database, and county checks. And then you have to also have your own personal vehicle, 4 doors, 10 years or newer, and then your own personal insurance, on top of which we put our industry-leading $1 million commercial policy.
And I want to continue to get into some of the details there, but basically, so it's another way of getting around it. We're using the smartphone, and the fascinating thing is, with everyone knows with these, there's any number of apps, so Uber being one, and it's creating new technologies, and some of which we might have said, why didn't I think of that? And so ride sharing is one of the new ones. So relative to that, so to follow up with what you were just saying, anyone can be an Uber driver, or you have to be qualified to be an Uber driver, but anyone, I guess, can apply. Are they working 8 hours? Can they just plug in or turn themselves on and turn themselves off as far as being available? How does that work?
It's whatever they want to do. So I rode with someone a week or so ago who was a 29-year veteran of the Chicago Police Department. He was a homicide detective, and he drives maybe 10 hours a week. He hops on his own time to pick up some extra cash on top of his pension, and he likes to talk to people, give people rides. But you've got other people who maybe they lost a shift at work and they need to pick up some extra cash to pay the bills, or it's a teacher in the summer, or it's a taxi driver who didn't want to drive a taxi anymore and they work full-time. But it's completely up to their choice. They will get on the system whenever they want, dropping off the kids, coming home from school. Maybe you just turn it on, give a few rides, and then come home.
Now, when somebody, let's stay with the income aspect. If I get in a car and you're my driver, before I get in the car, does it tell me how much I'm going to pay?
It can, yeah. There's a feature in the app called a fare estimate. So it will tell you exactly from where you are. You enter a destination. It'll tell you, within a range, just how much that will cost.
So I might be in the loop as we're sitting here, and I say I want to go to Northwestern up in Evanston.
Yep.
And somebody will say, I'll pick you up, and it'll be $20 or whatever it would be.
Exactly.
Of the $20, does that include a tip or no?
So tip is not required, and the system, what it does is, if it's 20 bucks, then 16 goes to the driver, 4 goes to Uber on average. It's about 80% that goes to the driver.
Okay, and that was going to be my next question. How long has Uber been around?
Uber started in San Francisco in 2009, and we came to the Chicago market in 2011. But the main product that we're talking about today, which is the rideshare product, UberX, that launched just last year, so it's a little bit over a year old.
Well, what's the difference between UberX and what you were doing before?
So in the app, actually, you can request UberX, you can also request a city taxi, and you can also request a limo. So if it's a date night or fancy business meeting, or if you just like to ride in style, you can take a Lincoln MKS, Mercedes S550, and those are livery-plated chauffeur's vehicles that are priced to match.
And can you book it ahead of time? I mean, let's say I wanted to have a wedding or whatever, some party, and I wanted to have one of these limos instead of just someone picking me up in a clean Volkswagen. Can I request those cars and book them ahead of time, or is this more of a, as we would with a taxi, you come out of a meeting and you want to just get from point A to point B?
It's really on demand, and so you open the app whenever you need it. And the wonderful thing about it, though, is that it's always there. It's incredibly reliable. So I could check my phone right now in the loop, probably going to be about 2-3 minutes away. I live in Logan Square. On average, I wait maybe 5 minutes. I was at a recruiting event down on 97th Street South with Pastors United for Change this week. It was an 8-minute wait time. And that's in a neighborhood where, if you're familiar with it, if you want to call a taxi, you're probably going to wait about 45 minutes, and you'll cross your fingers and hope that they actually come.
Well, and that was one thing I was going to say. When I open the app, am I going to see where the drivers are? How do I?
That's exactly it. So you've got a little map with a Google Maps on it, and you'll see cars nearby. As soon as someone accepts your request, you see that car, and you see it moving along the map right until it's right towards you. When it's 1 minute away, it'll vibrate your phone and tell you that they're arriving. That way, in case you're up in your apartment still getting ready, or maybe having a coffee, you know exactly when they're coming, so you can walk downstairs, don't have to wait outside in the rain. It's kind of a magic thing. Once you really try it, you realize, how did this not exist before?
It's like a lot of things we do. It's like, how did we get by without the internet before?
Yeah.
Well, in that end, I mean, it is interesting, and I say this, I have not tried it as yet, so it's a new experience to me as well, as far as just imagining it, but I can see where when one is waiting for a taxi to show up, you don't know, even though you called, are they 30 seconds away, or is it going to be another 10 minutes? So to see the little car would be, at least you have some inkling. Is this 24/7? If you're coming out of the bars at 3 a.m., is there going to be an Uber driver around?
It is 24/7. It's incredibly reliable, and that's actually one of the great benefits of it, is especially in communities where you don't have great options for taxi service or public transit, the reduction in DUIs and impaired driving is incredible. We did a study.
You have evidence? I was going to say you just.
We do. So we did a study. Seattle has the most available public DUI arrest data, and I have some anecdotal evidence. We hear it all the time as well. But in Seattle, in the year after we launched there, we did some econometric studies, and we saw a reduction in DUI arrests associated with our entry of about 10%. And that's a big city. We reduced DUI arrests in Seattle by about 10% because people have a safe alternative and can leave their keys at home.
Why wouldn't they be calling a cab?
Because cabs aren't that available. And
do they stop driving at a certain time or what?
Well, they have a fixed, because of the way taxis are structured, there's a set number of them. It never goes up, it never goes down. There's only so many cars on a shift. It's capped.
Whereas yours is more elastic because people can be working 8 hours or they can work. Do they have to log in as a driver for any length of time? Can I be on for 20 minutes or a half an hour? Or is there...
Any amount of time you want. And so the amazing part about that is that not only is it flexible for the driver, they can do it whenever they want on their schedule, but because demand is also very elastic, you don't get too many requests at 10 a.m. on a Tuesday, everybody's at work. But you get a lot of requests at 2 a.m. on a Friday or at 6 p.m. on a Saturday when everybody's going out to dinner. At that period, many more drivers come on the system. So demand, or supply flexes to meet demand. So on a Saturday at 2 a.m., that's peak supply. That's when the most cars are on the road and people are getting home safely. They're choosing not to pick up their keys and get in their car.
And then I guess if they left their car parked in a parking lot because they didn't feel safe to drive, they just call Uber up and someone takes them back to their car the next day.
They can do it that way, or because it's so reliable, even more, they don't even take their car out to begin with. I mean, if you're talking about Chicago, I live in Logan Square. I want to come to River North to go out to a bar. Parking's going to cost me $35. The Uber ride's probably going to, the Uber ride's going to be about $7. So I can pay $7 to get there, $7 to get back. And I'm not talking about gas, insurance, parking, and how expensive that DUI arrest and ticket's going to be. Not to mention the risk for everybody else on the road because I make a bad choice.
Let's talk about two ways. If I am, so first of all, when I request a driver, do I get all of a sudden 5 Uber drivers showing up at the same time to take me somewhere?
Nope. So it will request the nearest driver, and if they accept, that one person comes to you.
Now, that was the next question. Can I, as a passenger, I see the driver and I go, well, I don't feel comfortable getting in with Joe here. I mean, can I reject getting in with him?
You could. Yeah, you could do that.
And what about on the other alternative? If I'm a driver and I don't like the looks of the passengers, can I reject them?
Theoretically, you could. In general, that's pretty rare. Most people on the system, because of the way it's designed, there's a great deal of trust. Drivers and riders rate each other at the end of every ride, and the purpose of that and that feedback is it gives an incentive for everybody in the system to behave themselves.
So it might be that as a passenger, people might say, that Terry Martin, it flags that we don't want to have him because he talks about pension reform all the time. But I mean, you would actually get a rating just kind of like an Angie's List of passengers, which would be fascinating.
And I mean, the point of that is...
Or like a Yelp, people might be familiar
Exactly.
with, like a restaurant. People would give feedbacks and they could say it's a nice restaurant or not or whatever.
That's exactly it. And the whole point is it creates a community and it creates a little bit of accountability. Because you go take a taxi, I throw my hand in the air off the street, I don't know who that driver is. And if I have a problem, if I leave my cell phone in their car or they drive like a maniac, I can call a hotline, but I don't know how long it's going to take for them to get back to me. With this system, we both know who each other are. They have my credit card information. There's a customer support team around the world dedicated to answering questions. So last week, our average response time was about 15 minutes. So if you left your cell phone in a cab and you called the city, I haven't fortunately had that issue, but I'm guessing it takes a bit more than 15 minutes to get a response and get your phone back.
So, in short, as far as why Uber exists, you basically would say, if I can summarize, you're building the better mousetrap. That it's less investment to have than it would be to have a fleet of cab cars that you have to own and maintain. Therefore, you can have an unlimited number of drivers who can show up faster, will charge you less, and they have some standards, at least to be an Uber driver, as you referenced. The car is to be less than 10 years old. What are the qualifications again, or some of the things that one would have to do? And then, of course, this is how do I know that the person who's an Uber driver hasn't had 14 DUIs?
So we run more thorough background checks than any other industry. We do.
Do you do drug testing?
We comply with all state requirements, and we have a zero tolerance policy. But the background checks are multi-state, state, county, federal, and then registered sex offender and motor vehicle history. So someone who has a bunch of DUIs will not be on the system. And in fact, that compared to what the state and the city require, they only require state-level background checks. So we've rejected dozens of currently licensed taxi drivers who committed crimes in places like Ohio or Colorado because the state background check doesn't pick that up.
Like what kind of, just as for instance?
No, I mean, they're felonies. Like you can have a violent felony in Ohio and still get a taxi license here. But our background check picks that up. And we've rejected those people. So I actually feel much safer getting into an into an UberX ride because I know that's a better background check system, and I know who that person is. I don't know who a street hail taxi driver is.
No, I wanted to give people who wouldn't have been familiar with the whole concept, and I think we've kind of done that, and it's
Absolutely.
not on that hard to understand. What about the idea that, on the other hand, here you have taxi companies. I know in New York they would have to have the medallions to be a driver, and those medallions sell for.
In New York, it's about $1 million.
How much?
In New York, it's about, the last one I heard was $970,000.
Okay, that's much even more. I was going to say maybe 200,000. So it's a lot. That's per car.
Yeah.
And now, so is Uber in New York?
Uber is in New York.
So what do we say about, the fact that here these taxi companies heretofore are heavily regulated, they've got all that investment, and then they would argue that you're coming in, and I haven't talked to them, so maybe I'm misphrasing it, but I would guess that they would say that you have it's unfair competition because you're flying below the regulatory radar where they're required to jump through all the regulatory hoops.
I would say that taxi has benefited from an unfair playing field for decades. The owners of taxi medallions are the people who want that regulation because that prevents other people from competing. A taxi medallion has gone up more in value over the past 10 years than gold, than the S&P 500. It is one of the best investment classes, and the reason why is because it's a restricted supply. And everybody keeps buying into it because they never issue new medallions. So the value of that medallion that early 2000s might have been 20 grand in Chicago is near $400,000 today.
Wow.
That system means that the people who own the vast majority of the medallions, which, let's be very clear, it's a concentrated few people, own several $100 million worth of medallions. Those are the people who own the taxi industry, and they're heavily involved in lobbying the government. There was a Washington Post study done in the past couple weeks that the taxi industry spends $3,500 on lobbying and political activity for every $1 that rideshare spends. So they're the ones who put those fences up because they don't want other people there. It protects their investment.
Actually, I want to ask, who owns Uber? Is Uber a publicly traded company?
Uber is a private company.
And you're in how many, in North America, in the United States, how many cities are you in?
I believe we're in about 90, and globally we're in 40.
And that's since 2009?
Yes.
It's quite an expansion in a relatively short amount of time.
It is.
So there was a bill that passed the legislature. It's now on the governor's desk. He has to act on it. HB 4075. What would that bill do?
That bill would basically put a screeching halt to the growth of rideshare in Illinois.
So you want him to veto the bill?
We would like him to veto it. He has a chance to get this right. There are a lot of other states that have embraced this movement because they see the benefits of the higher income for people who want to pick up extra cash, the riders who are getting home and anywhere safely, and they've welcomed it in. But Illinois, unfortunately, this bill gets it very, very wrong.
I was going to say that I remember that there was a committee hearing where we were covering it, and that bill had some bipartisan support. In other words, you have both Republicans and Democrats. It's not just a one-party thing. Not to say it doesn't have, on the other hand, bipartisan opposition too, but it would impose some. Why, in your estimation, let's just do it this way, why, in your estimation, would that bring Uber to a screeching halt? And incorporate, if you would, in your answer, if you know, how have these issues been dealt with in other cities, other states?
Absolutely. So what this bill does is it overreaches. It puts up red tape and barriers to drivers getting on the road. It makes it a lot harder for someone who only wants to drive 5 or 10 hours a week to go do that. And that's through lots of fees and licensing structures. And then it also applies an insurance model from a taxi industry that's frankly inappropriate. Other states have handled this by doing basic measures to guarantee consumer safety, which we support. We're pro common sense regulation. We want there to be regulation that allows competition and allows for choice and does guarantee safety. But what this bill does that other states don't do is it overreaches on that. It puts on a lot more barriers that make it very difficult for drivers to get on the road.
Like what would be onerous in your mind?
It has arbitrary hours caps. No other state has put in a system where you have a cap of hours that, depending on how many hours you drive, you have to get certain types of vehicle plating or go through certain type of state licensing exams.
Well, to that issue, let's just say, and of course I'm not arguing one way or another, but asking, if you're a truck driver, you're regulated as far as how many hours you can drive. How do we know that the driver who maybe lost their job isn't working 20 hours a day and really is going to be falling asleep at the wheel? How do we, I mean, you would say it's the limited hours would not be a fair regulation?
Well, so what the point of that hour structure, though, and what they're doing there is they're saying anyone who drives more than 18 hours a week. So, that's...
So it's too small, but
well,
the limit is too low? Is
it's not that it's too small or too low, it's just that it's arbitrary. Why am I insured safety as a consumer if a driver has one standard at 17 hours a week and then the next week they drive 20 hours and they need different standards? It doesn't make sense. And no other state has done that.
What if I'm driving and we are of no fault to the Uber driver, but we're broadsided by another vehicle in an intersection? Am I, as a passenger, insured by Uber?
Absolutely.
And if so, to what extent? Is there a cap on the coverage that I would get?
You are insured at triple the level that a Chicago taxi is insured at.
And what level would that be?
$1 million, whereas a Chicago taxi carries $350,000 of insurance.
Per passenger, per incident?
It is per incident and, per incident.
Okay, not necessarily per passenger then.
I would need to double check on that, but it's $1 million, which is triple the level that taxis carry.
What about the Bill of Rights? You get in a car, a taxi cab, and it'll say you have the right to have the driver not be on his cell phone. And I didn't memorize it, but we've all gotten into various taxis and read the Bill of Rights. Is there a Bill of Rights for Uber passengers?
There are terms of service that partners agree to when they come on the system. It includes not talking on your cell phone. It includes allowing service animals for people who have service animals. It includes things like never denying service based on pickup address or destination. And that particular one is something that we're very proud of. I think a lot of people in Chicago, outside of the core downtown area, know that it's pretty hard to get a taxi. And taxis don't like going out into other neighborhoods. They don't like going to the south side.
Well, and let's talk about that just frankly. I mean, everyone who pays attention knows that there have been a lot of murders on the south side of Chicago. If I'm an Uber driver and just trying to make some extra bucks, can I refuse to go down to a certain area because I just don't feel safe if it's 3 in the morning?
So Uber drivers agree to take people wherever they want to go. And the amazing thing about the system, though, is that it allows people to feel safer. So I know that
the driver or the passenger?
Both.
But specifically, let's say I'm an unwed, a divorced mother, and I just don't feel safe driving at 3 a.m. I pick some guy out of a barn, he wants to go down to a dangerous neighborhood. Can I say, no, I'm not going to do that? Well,
so that mother probably wouldn't be on the road at 3 a.m. because if she doesn't feel safe driving and taking someone out around from a bar, she probably wouldn't be in the car to begin with.
So that's the deal. If you're going to be driving at 3, if you want to get the bar business, you got to be willing to take someone to an area that might be less desirable.
If you want to be on the road and providing rides at any time, you would have to be comfortable providing rides. The nice thing about it, though...
If I refused, do I get kicked out as being an Uber driver?
The system, there is always feedback, and we monitor drivers for meeting their terms of service. If there's egregious behavior, we'll work with them to make sure that that's not repeated. But the key is that drivers provide the rides that people need, and there's an incredible social benefit to that because the areas of the city that you can't get a taxi in, 40% of our rides begin and end there. And that means that people who didn't have access to those rides beforehand can now get somewhere for less cost. And those are people who have to switch buses 3 times to get to their job. Those are people who had to wait 45 minutes for a taxi or pay a really expensive car payment and parking. And
Well, and another thing is, I mean, just not to make the points for you, but if somebody lost their job or if they have a lower paid wage, taking a taxi can just be cost prohibitive.
It is. It's expensive.
And again, a lot of people that might watch this don't drive, you know, they're living in Effingham or something, and if one looks at an Effingham, let's say, I don't even know if they have taxi. There's some services where there's just not really a lot of taxi business available. What about that? How do you select where you're going, and are you only going to stay in the Chicagoland area because of the density, or do you plan to go into other communities around Illinois?
We would love to bring the benefits of UberX all over Illinois. We've launched in all size cities. Texas is a good example. We're in Amarillo, we're in Lubbock, as well as Dallas and Houston and
how
Austin.
big are those communities as an example, do you know?
I can't tell you population, but they're certainly not the size of Houston or Chicago or cities
So
like
if
that.
it's something like a Springfield, which is in the neighborhood of 150,000, let's say, is that a big enough size, or do you say we're not going to go below 40,000 or something?
We don't have a cap. We'd love to bring UberX everywhere. Like honestly, people everywhere can use it, and so we'd love to be in Springfield. We'd love to be in Bloomington Normal and Rockford and the Metro East St. Louis area, Champaign-Urbana.
Is the, you know, speaking of that, I was actually going to, well, first of all, is the app a free app?
The app is free.
You just mentioned East St. Louis. Let's say, are you in St. Louis?
We are working on being in St. Louis.
And the reason I ask, when I grew up in St. Louis, but the point would be if I'm a Uber driver in East St. Louis, can I take someone across state lines to a St. Louis, which would, or not? Or does all of a sudden the legal protections as a driver drop at the border?
I am not as familiar with the St. Louis area, but what I can tell you is that in Chicago and in Illinois, we've done very well. Like we've been able to take people where they need to go.
I suppose you could just say our services, we don't cross state lines if that were a problem for the driver.
You could. We haven't had that issue.
And then lastly, and this is maybe a little silly argument, but when you leave your cell phone or umbrella in the Uber car, this stuff happens, of course, all the time. Is there some way of getting your product back, or is it finders keepers?
It's incredibly easy, and that's, again, one of the great benefits is that we have a customer service team that will reply back to you within about 15 minutes, and you can get your phone back right away. I've personally done that. I had an SUV that I was in, and I left my phone, and I got it back the same night.
Do you have to pay for the driver to come back and give you? I mean, because that would have been your fault.
I did not. So the thing is, the drivers are friendly. I had a car, got a ride yesterday. It was actually from the event at 97th Street South. The driver offered me a stick of gum and a bottle of water. There are people who are enjoying what they're doing.
And if somebody wants to apply, how can they get a hold of Uber?
So you just go to uber.com, and if you want to download the app as a rider, go to the Google Play Store, or in your Apple device, you can go to the App Store, look up Uber, download it. It's one of the most popular apps in both stores. And the other thing I would just say is that if you're watching this and you want these benefits in other parts of Illinois, please go to uber.com/veto. That is where our petition is currently housed. We yesterday had about 70,000 signatures. Today we're already at, I believe, 74,000. The people of Illinois are speaking that they want this, and they want Governor Quinn to get it right for Illinois, and that he has a great chance to step up and defend the consumers who need the service and the drivers who need the chance to earn extra income.
All right. Well, Chris Taylor, we appreciate you taking the time to explain to us.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
You're watching the Illinois Channel, an independent nonprofit corporation formed to provide gavel-to-gavel coverage of Illinois state government and other public affairs events taking place across Illinois.